Hi, folks. Welcome back to Father-Offspring Interviews, episode 18. I'm very happy to say that the gang is back together. So we are going to be getting to do these in person for a little bit here.
The offspring is back, which makes up for the trauma of my having to move a couple of inches over from where I've sat on the 17 previous ones of these. So welcome home.
Very happy to be here. It's going to be fun. Okay, we're going to jump right in. So our first question is, do you have any favorite studies?
Well, there's all sorts of studies out there that I've loved, but some of them are just so charming that they have to be discussed. And one that comes to mind here is like this definitive study of tickle science. And it's built around sort of an first ancillary issue of why is it that only some people can tickle us and not others? And it's got everything to do with who they are. So if you're like 6 and this is your favorite nutty uncle, they'll tickle you and it feels ticklish. Or if you're 12 and that person who's making you feel all giggly and giddy and weird is doing it to you, that will be ticklish also. But on the other hand, it probably would not feel as ticklish if it was being done to you by, I don't know, Vladimir Putin, for example. I personally would not. So it depends on who the person is. It's got to be in a benevolent context, all of that. But that leads you to really the main question of this scientific arc, which is why can't we tickle ourselves? And what these scientists speculated was it's because when you go to tickle yourself, you know exactly where you are going to go, as seen in this demonstration, and you know exactly what movement you're going to make when, and it's the lack of surprise. So what they did was they built a tickle machine, which would transduce your movement of it through some, I don't know, prosthetic glove or some chat GPT or whatever it is you people think about these days, but some that would put in a slight time lag, plus or minus about a quarter second, and a slight spatial lag, plus or minus about a half inch. So you would begin to make the motion, and at an unexpected time and place, you would get, and people reported themselves feeling slightly ticklish as a result. So it's the element of surprise in a benevolent setting. Okay, any sane, reasonable person would feel like everything about tickle science has now been found out. But this then moved people on to a next question is why is it that some individuals with schizophrenia can tickle themselves? And it has to do with the depersonalization, the uncertainty as to where you stop and the rest of the world begins, the voices that are making reality and your own sort of ego boundaries seem a little shaky and all of that, such that doing this can catch you by surprise and you could perceive it as being ticklish. So some people with schizophrenia can tickle themselves. Most of us cannot if we know exactly when and where. If we are made to surprise ourselves, then it works. So that's the current state of tickle science.
All right. So next, Alex from Ukraine says, evil is stronger than good, some psychologists say. Bad emotions, bad parents, and bad feedback make more impact on people's lives than good effects ever can. Bad impressions and bad stereotypes are quicker to form and far more durable. Friendships developed through years can be ruined by a single bad action. What is your view on this negativity dominance? What do we know about brain mechanisms which receive neutral information and create from it the feelings of good and bad, pleasant and unpleasant, right and wrong?
Well, I don't find it surprising at all that a question about the roots of evil and good is coming from Alex in Ukraine, given circumstances there. But I think what we're looking at is cognitive biases that we have, circumstances where two situations, two stimuli, two pieces of information are formally identical, but because of the framing, the context, all of that, we perceive them differently. We make different choices about them. We remember them more or less effectively. And this was work pioneered by these two behavioral economists who sort of started the whole field, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize in Economics for that totally amazing science, looking at what they called sort of cognitive heuristics, circumstances where you just do something weird and illogical with information, and most people tend to do it, and it's just sort of a cognitive shortcut that we take where you could set it up experimentally to reveal that actually you were showing a cognitive bias at that point that makes no sense at all. Classic study of theirs that shows that, which I love. You tell somebody, okay, you got a population, there's 2 diseases in this population. Each disease accounts for 50% of the deaths. You could make an amazing scientific discovery. You could come up with a discovery that cures all of the cases of one of the 2 diseases, or you could come up with a discovery that cures 50% of the cases of each of the 2 diseases. They're exactly the same. 50% times 1 is the same thing as 25% plus 25%. They're absolutely identical, but people have a very strong bias. They want to get rid of all the cases of the one disease. People always go for that, this desire for closure, to know we can cross that disease off the list. All sorts of circumstances where you have biases like that. There's this other one they showed. Okay, you sit somebody down and you say, okay, I'm gonna ask you a trivia question, and if you get the answer wrong, nothing happens. If you get the answer right, I'm going to give you $5. Or they can say, here's $5. I'm going to ask you a trivia question. If you get it right, we're done. If you get it wrong, you got to give the $5 back. Exactly equivalent at the end of the day. And people really have an aversion to losing something they already now possess. Possession is 9/10 of the law. So they uncovered all sorts of cognitive biases, heuristics and stuff that most of us fall for because they're convenient shorthands. They're convenient shortcuts, I should say. Okay, so a lot of those come into the question of why is it easier to do evil, to perceive evil, to remember evil rather than good? The doing it is very straightforward because it's a lot easier. It takes a hell of a lot more work to build up something than to destroy it. Entropy is almost always on the side of evil and destructiveness there. And it's simply, rolling downhill in terms of the easier thing is to disrupt and take apart and impair the structure and the efficiency and the cooperativity and the happiness and all that sort of. Here's an example. You take 2 college freshmen, they're roommates, and at the beginning of the year, one of them drinks a lot and is very attached to doing that. One of them drinks not at all and is very attached to do that, and come back to them at the end of the first year, and the odds are much, much more likely that both of them drink by now rather than neither of them drink by now. Which direction does peer pressure go? Which way does it flow with that? There's a wonderful asymmetry with that occurred to me. Okay, so you got a piece of food, you got a piece of bread, and a gigantic cockroach walks across it. And as a result of there being physical contact between the cockroach and the bread, you feel as if the bread has been made inedible. You don't want to eat it now. Why is that the direction of our bias? Why is it not that because of this contact, this edible bread has now made the cockroach seem edible? That's asymmetrical. Okay, so with evil, part of it also is that it's easier to perceive evil than good. It's easier to see destruction rather than the slow accretion of structure and function and all. You can see, Rome being taken apart in a day, but it's very hard to perceive Rome being put together over the centuries or so. It's easier to see. Much more importantly, it's more exciting. We're much more excited by arousing negative information, news about evil acts, destructive acts rather than positive ones. That's why what's the newspaper, if it bleeds, it leads, why the nightly news always starts off with something horrendous and something awful and heartbreaking. And there's no news station out there that ever starts the evening news by saying, whoa, just wanted to let you know we have now gone more than 465 days in our town without any cases of scurvy among kindergartners. That somehow doesn't spread the same way. And this has been shown in formal experiments. This was studied on some years ago, I believe with Google people, along with some psychologists, which raised all sorts of ethical issues afterward. But they identified networks of people who talk to each other online with computers, your people's stuff. Where they planted a rumor into somebody in one of these groups, either a rumor of some really salacious gossip about someone or some really heartwarming gossip, and they were then able to track the speed with which it sort of trickled outward. And what you saw was bad news, scurrilous news, gossipy news, backstabbing news, all of that spread faster and wider and rippled outward much faster. Now, tied up with that is the fact that, evil and horrible, upsetting things are more arousing to us than the news that, another day has gone by without anybody holding up the town library or something. And what that does is because evil, bad, is more arousing, you remember it better. You see this thing, if you were stressed out of your mind, your memory goes out the window. If you were moderately stressed, if you were moderately aroused, moderately stimulated, memory is enhanced. And we remember that way better than, was it scurvy or Ebola virus that we haven't had in the kindergartens now? Something exciting, something negative, something evil, we remember much more. And it also taps into different parts of the brain. We use our cortex when we're doing some nice cognitive task of deciding if somebody is guilty or not of a crime. When it comes to then deciding how much punishment they should get, that's invoking the limbic system, emotional parts of the brain. And the are they guilty or not is about facts. How much should they be punished is how evil does it feel? Does it feel not how I've thought through the conflicting testimonies and 14 psychiatrists said contradictory things and all of that, but here's what I think happened. When it comes to doling out punishment, you're asking how evil does it feel that that person did that? So we consistently have this bias, a day with a car accident or a day without a car accident or a day that these can be equally impactful, yet we are biased in one particular direction. Damage, destruction, bad intent, malevolence, evil, whatever the hell that world means in the neurobiologically informed sort of world, that makes more of an impact. And I think that makes sense evolutionarily. There was this wonderful study years ago, two scenarios. Peasant comes to the king, and the king says, I give you a task to do, vile peasant. I want you to go out and slay this dragon and then do this and then do that. But if that happens, I want you to do this. But then if you get that, you need to be able to trade this for that. And then you need to, and then come back here with the result. And if you come back with the right result, I will make you rich beyond your dreams. And if you come back with the wrong result, I will instantly have you executed. And you were then told how the story unfolded, and the peasant goes and does this, and this person cheated them, and they got lost here, but then they found their way, and they traded this, and whole complicated thing. And they come back to the king at the end, and the king says either, here's your reward, or off with his head. And the question is, how good are we at detecting when the peasant actually screwed up and according to the contract set up, they should now get executed, but the king gives him a reward versus the peasant did exactly what was expected, and they come back, and the king says, no, off with his head. And we are much, much better at working through the logical steps of when a social contract has been violated, when the mighty have taken advantage of the weaker. But mostly on a logical level, we are much better at figuring out a sequence of things where if the endpoint is, did somebody cheat? Did somebody fail to do what they promised? Did somebody wind up being destructive in that? And it's the same logic, the same number of twists, and people are much, much better spotting somebody who is being a jerk and not following through on their benevolence than someone who's being some crazy, over-the-top, unexpectedly benevolent individual. And I think that what that comes down to is out in the world, bloody and tooth and claw, all of that, a false positive is a whole lot better than a false negative. Ooh, I'm afraid there's a lion in the bushes, I'm getting out of here, is a whole lot better than, oh, there couldn't be a lion there in the bushes, and there is a lion there in the bushes. I think we have had selection for a bias towards bad outcomes, bad news, undermining information about social coalitions, about trust, all that, that those are more consequential. It's fine if somebody makes a mistake and gives somebody else a big reward that they weren't supposed to. If it's going in the opposite direction, we're really attuned. We want to run away from bushes that turn out not to have lions in them. We don't want to barrel into bushes because we've decided there isn't a lion in there when there actually is one.
So for our final question for today, this is one that I've been excited about for a little bit because we finally get to do this in person. Do you have any photos of your baboon guys or any relics of them? Baboon ice sculptures carved out of science ice?
Okay, show and tell. I'm not showing any pictures, but I just happened to bring my cello. I just happen to have here 2 baboon skulls of individuals who I knew, and these are beautiful skulls. If you come from my kind of world, things like bones and skulls are totally irresistible. But what we have here is an adult male baboon and an adult female baboon. And if you know a lot about this evolution of behavior stuff, this instantly tells you something very informative. You spot a primate species where females and males have skulls of the same size. They're going to pair bond for life. The males do a lot of taking care of the offspring. The females are much more likely to select a male who shows parenting skills rather than some big studly guy. There's not a whole lot of aggression. In contrast, you get a species where the male is a lot bigger than the female, where the male has all sorts of secondary sexual characteristics, like this big old canine here, which this female doesn't have, in part because the canine fell out somewhere along the way, but it's a whole lot smaller. What you're looking at here is what termed a tournament species, and what's going on when you have a tournament species. Thank you, my lovely assistant. Okay, what's going on when you have a tournament species is males are being selected for aggression. Males do no parenting. Females are not looking for a competent father. They are looking for evidences of good genes, of good, and you get a very baboons are this type of species like crazy. So this is an adult male, and you will note this first premolar has this flat surface. It's called a sectorial premolar. I think I made that up. I've forgotten the term. But what happens is when a male brings his canines down on it, he grinds them and he's sharpening them just before a fight. So you will have 2 males ready to face off, and they will be pumping their jaws like this to sharpen their teeth, and you don't see females doing that. Okay, so those are my 2 prized baboon skulls. This came from someone who is a good guy, a really good guy. This female I did not know well. But in addition, no, I don't have any ice sculptures, but for the last half decade, here it is, I have been slowly constructing a chicken wire baboon. And here, most of it isn't here yet, but here's where its torso is. Here's one arm, here's another, here's one foot, another, and we're getting close to putting on a head. And that's where I stopped about 6 years ago because it got beyond my skill set. But this is my chicken wire baboon in progress. This is exactly what the back of a baboon looks like, an adult male baboon. So this is my official baboon art project, Chachka, and someday I will finish it.
That is all for episode 18. Keep submitting your questions in the form found in the Instagram story highlight and bio or the YouTube video description. I'm Offspring Sapolsky. This is Chicken Wire Baboon Sapolsky. And thanks for your continued support of science and the beard.